I, as a small business, is going to look and say, okay, which one of these are better for me, or can I qualify for both?
Everything has changed with the CAA Act from the CARES Act in 2020. And so in 2021, you can decide whether you're doing the ERC, the PPP2, or maybe both. So we want to talk about how do you make that decision? Which one do you choose? So Larry, go ahead and explain to us what the best thing to do for a small business.
We now, as we know from our prior videos, that we could get up to $7,000 a quarter with qualified wages, or a total of $14,000 with ERC.
Per employee.
Per employee, yes. And that's each quarter, $7,000. Or we can get the PPP2 and get that loan, which then could be 2.5 times payroll. The contention here is that we're saying we qualify for both. And there's a majority of small business that's going to qualify for both. So what we're looking at is a time period of first and second quarter 2021. And what we're after is we're going to look at qualified wages and kind of see what the kind of playing field is here through June 30th. So I'm going to take PPP2 first. And in it, when you make the application, and remember on the PPP2, guidance is coming from SBA, but your local lender, the person or party, company you went to for PPP1, you're going to go probably to that same person, and they're going to have all the rules of the information they need. But it's all determined, both these are still determined on qualified wages. So what it says, if I go out here and apply for the loan in January, it's going to look at the prior 12-month average payroll to decide how much I get on that 2.5 times, because in the end, that's going to be what's going to be forgiven. So this 2.5 times in this chart, we're qualified because there's a 25% reduction in receipts in a quarter. And again, we've got a video on that. But let's say that in January, we qualified for the reduction in gross receipts. Well, if we make the application then, we're looking at 12 months back. But then when we can now choose a period, we're going to be looking out here in the future somewhere as far as when we spend the money for the qualified expenses. So then we can look in February. So this is January. This is February. And then we can do it in March. Each time that look back is 12-month look back sliding forward. But let's say in March, I qualify, or we qualify for all 3 quarters. And in March, I want the loan. Well, then what happens is my qualified wages I spend the money on, May is going to be on down the road here, and it may go beyond June 30th. So the qualified wages there. I'm going to lead into which is better, or what's the choice. So the point of it is, then my concern here, they might run out of funds. So the thing about it is you're going to look at the PPP and say, how much is it? And really the focus here is that 2.5 times average, that I'm going to get in a loan. And then if I spend it on qualified expenses, which is, 60% at least payroll, then what's going to happen, that's kind of the number I'm looking for on how much do I get forgiven. Whereas we look in the ERC, and what we figured out there is if I have $10,000 per employee of qualified wages per quarter, I can then get a $7,000 refundable credit. And if I want to accelerate, not wait to the end of the quarter, I can use the Form 7200 and file it. And I can actually file it every single pay period and start getting that's refundable now. And actually under the ERC, what I'm calling 2, or the CAA Act of 2021, is that I can actually now, as a small business, get actually refundable credits even before I pay the payroll. I'm waiting to see that guidance, and hopefully it's out here in the next couple of weeks. But then over here, again, if I have 10,000 qualified wages, then what happens is I can get a $7,000 per employee per quarter for a grand total out here of $14,000. So at that point in time, I, as a small business, is going to look and say, okay, which one of these are better for me? Or can I qualify for both? And as long as you're qualified, and what we mean there is that if we're 25% gross receipt reduction in a quarter for the PPP, then I'm going to get conceptually here 2.5 times the payroll for a forgiveness. Now, we can't double dip. So the qualified wages, then when we're spending it, we can't use it to get ERC. So then when we get to ERC, so let's say I don't make my loan app, I don't make my loan app till February or March. Well, when I start spending that money, at that point in time, that's not qualified wages. So then what happens is under the ERC, I can again get this 14. And Laura, what I had you to do here is just kind of, again, we're looking at arrows and concepts. What I'd really like to do is I would look at this little chart, and it's a comparison that if we had a qualified business that qualified for the PPP, which means their gross receipts fell by 25% in a quarter, or we got an ERC qualified business, which means they were either shut down or partially shut down, or the new ERC test for 2021, which is different than 2020, of a drop in gross receipts of 20%, then we qualify for these credits. And again, it's based on qualified wages per employee. So, Laura, I want to thank you for doing this for me, because with my hand the way it is, you wouldn't be able to read my writing. So what I did here is I said, okay, what happens if we're paying one employee $30,000 in a period, in a year? So if I take the 30, and what I'm going to do is, I'm going to divide that into 4. So each one of these, I should put this as the annual. So if I'm paying somebody, that's $15 an hour, approximately. What happens under the PPP, I'm going to get 2.5 months of that, or $6,500, that if I spend it correctly, then what happens is that's going to be forgiven. So that's my benefit. And I get it at the time I make the loan. That same wage I'm going to end up getting $52.50 for the first quarter and $52.50 for the second quarter, or a total of $10.5. So would I rather have the 65 or the 10.5? But that's for one employee. But let's say then I've got another employee at $60,000. Well, I'm going to take that, I'm going to divide that by 12, or 5,000, and then 2.5 times 5 is 12,500. Then I'm going to get my PPP loan if this is my qualified wage, and that's going to be 12.5. But under the ERC, I'm going to get 7,000 in the first quarter because I maxed out at 10. So 10 times 70% is 70. In the second quarter, I'm going to get 7,000 because that's the max credit, or a total of 14. So do I want the 14,000 or do I want the 12.5? Well, it looks like I'm kind of leaning, not sure. Well, let's say we have one person that makes 100,000 or more, because now we've got to the cap. Under the PPP, the credit for an individual person cannot be greater than $20,833. But if I look over here under the ERC, I'm still at that same cap of I cannot have more than 10,000 in a quarter qualified wages, and my credit cannot be greater than 7,000 for my 2 quarters, or 14. So in this case, if this was our 3 employees, what would happen is we would look at this total, which is less than 40, and I'm going to look at this total, and that's going to be 28 plus 10 is 38. So technically in this situation, it's almost close to even, unless I can qualify the PPP, back to our slide here, unless I can qualify my PPP and also qualify part of these wages for the ERC. So I think that's the important thing, is this is if we had this here, this piece of paper here, it's if we had one or the other. But the way to maximize this is, again, once the guidance is out, we're going to look at going to the bank or the lending institution and saying we want to make a loan because we've met the threshold of a drop of 25% in gross receipts. Before in PPP1, it just had to be necessary. Now, there's a new sheriff in town. There's a new set of rules for both of these. So at that point in time, probably in January, I'm going to have some wages that are ERC. So in that light, I'm probably going to get a little of both. So again, this is a reminder, you can qualify for both of them, but this example of, again, this is just one with 3 employees, but whatever, it's the summation, but each one of these is employee by employee, pay period by pay period. So, you got any questions or comments?
So because we line this out employee by employee, you got to look and see what's best. Can you pick and choose? Can I get ERC for one employee and PPP for another? Or does it have to be one or the other?
Currently, with no guidance, it's going to be, you're going to pick the pay periods. As I said there toward the end, you're going to pick the pay periods, and you can't just pick and choose which employees because you could actually take advantage. So, no, let's do it pay period by pay period. And again, go to the bank, find out what their rules are. And then again, like January, right now, ERC is wide open. So I hope this video helps. Please click on the bell if you want to follow up with our guidance and stuff. Subscribe. And then, Laura, I think it's that time when we have to end this show again.
No.
We'll be back.
Hope this helps.